You're listening to the weekly Dartscast. 180!
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast in association with Darts Corner. I'm Alex Moss and alongside me, my co-host, the Darts Statistician, and I've got to hand him back the Darts Driver King title. He's been setting PBs for fun. Burton, DeWitt, how are you doing?
Well, one of those PBs was the app glitched, unless you're talking about the darts part, because I've definitely been setting PBs for fun at darts on a Monday night. So I'm doing just fine. How are you, Alex?
Glad to hear it. Yeah, all good here, thank you. We're recording this week's show a little later than usual on a Thursday evening, so that's why we're dropping a day later on a Friday this week. I'll hopefully be able to catch up on Thursday night's Emmerdale once we've finished recording this, but plenty to discuss. We've had a block of 5 days worth of darts over in Hildesheim to look back on, and we'll start off with the last couple of those days, the two Players' Championship events on Monday. Raymond van Barneveld rolling back the years to win Players' Championship 5, his first title in 3 years. What could this title mean for Barney's 2024 season?
The title, as I've said a few times, no one's ever going to be upset about winning a title. And especially for Raymond van Barneveld, when you look back, even before he retired, he had gone 5 years without winning 7 years without winning a ranking title before he retired, and been a little bit, not as long since without winning anything, but still 7 years without winning a ranking event, and then won his first month back on tour in 2021. But it was another wait of 3 years to win this one. But obviously, the 15,000 pounds is going to do just wonders to make sure that he gets to some events. You look at the World Matchplay race. Before this, he was just outside the projected spots. Now I won't say he's safe yet, but he's comfortably in. He's more than 10,000 pounds ahead of the 17th player in the ProTour order of merit. Unless he completely goes off the boil for the next 3 months, that means he's likely going to Blackpool. You look at the World Grand Prix, it's still very early, but he's over 20,000 pounds clear for that one. Again, probably needs another 10,000 when it's all said and done, but that's over 7 months, or 6.5 months, to make sure that he gets to the World Grand Prix. This title is going to make sure he's in not necessarily all the televised events, but most of them. He still will have work to do to get to the European Championships. But again, this does a lot to make sure that he is in one of those spots that automatically qualifies so that he's in the field. He still obviously will most likely have work to do to get to the Grand Slam. But beyond that, this has put him in that pole position to be in all the televised events, and it certainly is going to give him a little bit of confidence. If you look at how Raymond van Barneveld has performed since coming back on tour, his first year back, and again, this is limited just to the Players' Championship events, but I think it's a good representation of the level he played at. His first year back, he averaged 95. That was the 23rd highest on tour that year, and then dropped off to 93.5. But he stayed steady at that. He was 93.53 in 2022. That was 33rd highest. 93.65, basically the same thing last year, 38th highest. And through 6 Players' Championship events this year, he's basically the same again, 93.55, again the 38th highest on tour. He's consistently been just outside the top 32 in averages, and he's made up that little bit that's keeping him out of the top 32 in averages by winning in last legs. Last year, in last leg deciders, in Pro Tour events, 12-6. This year, 2-1. That's 2/3 of his last leg deciders and Players' Championships over the past 2 years that he's won. That makes that different. If you're winning 2/3 of your last leg deciders, that's like adding a half point to your average because you're winning the key legs. So it's a good 93.5. And okay, he lost the last leg decider on the European Tour this year. That doesn't go into those stats. He lost the last leg decider in the UK Open. And maybe that means on the big stage, he needs to be able to find that class and that clutchness that he's been able to find in the Players' Championship events, and hasn't necessarily been there this year on television and on the European Tour stage. But he's going to put himself in those positions at the level he's playing in, and if the Players' Championships are anything to go by, he's going to get it done in the Players' Championships. I want to also just mention that semifinal against Gary Anderson, another last leg decider. Sure, he withstood Anderson missing a dart at double 16 and a dart at double 8. But Raymond van Barneveld put the pressure on Gary Anderson and took the chance. Gary Anderson's been the best player in the world in the Players' Championship events this year, and Raymond van Barneveld held with him. He also beat Michael Smith in a match that Michael Smith averaged 7 more points than him, threw a 9-darter in. And he beat an informed Jermaine Wadamina, and then in the finals beat an informed Stephen Bunting. That was a phenomenal run of matches for Raymond van Barneveld. This match, as I said, this run is going to get him in all those televised events, or pretty much put him in that pole position to get there, and it'll give him confidence. And he's playing at a very high level. This might be the most consistent Raymond van Barneveld in close to a decade, and that should scare some people.
Yeah, I can't argue with any of that. And I'll be honest, Raymond van Barneveld wasn't a name on my list of potential title winners this week. He's had a fairly decent start to the year on the floor. He's had a couple of quarterfinals, a last 16 in the first 3 Players' Championships on the stage. He had a win against Rob Cross in the World Series, but as you say, lost in the UK Open in that last leg decider, lost early on the first Euro Tour as well. But this title, as you touched on there, it could open a lot of doors for him for the rest of the year that they weren't firmly shut beforehand, but he did have some work to do if he was going to get to the World Matchplay, get to the World Grand Prix again this year, and 2 events that we did see Barney back involved in last year. And we spoke to him in the summer last year, just before that return to Blackpool. He was in good spirits about how his comeback was going after he had that year out with retirement, but he wasn't prepared to sit back. He wanted to keep pushing for more. And I recall him saying to us that his goal was to get into the Pro Tour top 16. And obviously back then, before the rule changes with the Euro Tour, that did hold a lot more importance. But now after this title, he's still eyeing the top 16, but a different one. He wants to get back in the main one, get back into the world's top 16. He said in his interview after the final on Monday with the PDC about an equipment change as well. He's made dropping 2 grams from 25 grams to 23. Shows you again that he's still striving for more, even at this stage of his career in the latter years. But such is the strength in the PDC nowadays that if you do sit back, rest on your laurels even a little bit, you are going to get found out. And Raymond, by his own account, he's not someone who appears to be doing that at the moment. He said he's focused, he's confident with his new setup, and he believes that he can achieve more. And as for getting in that top 16, for a while now, he's been hovering around just inside the top 32, around the 29-30 mark. And to make that next leap, he needs to be having those deeper runs on the TV. And a couple of years ago, we saw him get to the semi-finals of the Grand Slam. That money's going to be coming off his ranking in November. But until then, that's a big chunk of money as well, by the way, 50 grand that's going to be coming off. But until then, not really defending an awful lot of money these next 7 to 8 months before we get to Wolverhampton. He's looking good now to maybe make that push up the rankings, because this title is all likelihood going to get him to the match play, get him to the Grand Prix. 2 years ago, he wasn't in either of those events. The European Championships, if he can get in that as well, while this title, it's not put any money towards that particular race, that Order of Merit, it has pretty much wrapped him up qualifying for all the rest of the Euro Tours this year. So all these doors are opening up again now for Raymond van Barneveld, and this title, it could mean everything for him. And it's the emphasis on the word could there, because it's given him a lot more opportunities now to try and kick on a lot more time on that stage. And if he can achieve that goal of getting back in the world's top 16, what an achievement that would be.
Well, let's also talk about the winner of Tuesday's event, as Dave Chisnall opens his account for 2024 by winning Players' Championship 6 and describes the title as a massive win for me. How important, though, do you think this win was for Dave Chisnall?
Yeah, just reading the quotes that Dave Chisnall gave after the final, it looks like this title has given him a lift, and perhaps his confidence had taken a hit following what for his high standards was a below par start to 2024. And I say a below par start because his first game of 2024 at the Masters, he averaged 109 and beat Martin Schindler 6-1. But more recently in the floor events, losing in the first round of the first 3 Players' Championships, and 2 of them with some averages that he wouldn't want to see again, a 76 and 85 in there. Bounced back with a last 16 on the floor, and the UK Open played pretty well in that event as well, running to Luke Littler in the last 16, lost 10-5, but averaged 101, close to 102 in that game. But winning is the best form of medicine, and to win the title the way he did it as well, a close encounter first round against Cameron Menzies, 6-5. Later on in the day, he had that 112 average against Dom Taylor, and there was an 11-darter to seal the deal against Ross Smith in the semi-finals. And then the final, finishing with an average of 90. There's not going to be many times these days in the PDC where you see a player win a final with a Players' Championship with an average that low. But you look at the game, he was 5-2 up against Dirk van Dijvenbode. He pegged it back to 5-all. Dave Chisnall puts in 2 great legs to wrestle back control at a 14-darter on throw, the 15-darter against throw, that 1-3-5 finish after Dirk had missed the chance to go 6-6. And in the end, there was a bit of luck. Dirk missing a chance to level it at 7 each, but Chizzy was there. He was ready and waiting on a double to get over the line, and that's got him off the mark for this year. And to get a title still relatively early on in the season when it's not been plain sailing for him, that is going to give him a boost. And it was always going to be hard for him, I think, to top his 2023 away from the TV cameras. Last year, he was the Pro Tour Player of the Year. He won 3 Euro Tours, 2 Players' Championships, and we were saying it, I know a lot more people were saying it, that 2023 wasn't going to be Chizzy's time to win one of those major titles. We both backed him at some point during the year to get over that hurdle of winning a major, and I wouldn't have called this a massive win for Dave Chisnall, especially with a fair few of the Premier League players missing in the action this week. But looking closer at it, reading what Chizzy's take on the win is just for himself, you can see how important it is for him, and it could be the start of bigger and better things to come. You'd expect him to start finding more results on the Euro Tour when they start to come round again, and he seems to really enjoy those weekends, and he goes into them with that high seeding as well, which can give you confidence before you even make the trip over there, knowing that you are going to be the number 1 or the number 2 seed and one of the players to beat. So maybe for Chizzy himself, just rebuilding some of that confidence, and to borrow Rod Stud's favourite word, momentum, this title, it could be massive for him.
Yeah, and not just momentum, but it proves that any result is possible, no matter how unlikely the outcome. Because if you look back, you mentioned at the start of the year, this did not seem like Chizzy's game was anywhere near winning a title. It wasn't anywhere near winning a match early in the season. You mentioned that 76 losing to Oscar Lukiziak, 85 against Leighton Bennett, 94 to Michel Toretta, who admittedly had a decent run that day. But it was a huge regression from last year. And you can even throw in the Euro Tour just a week ago. Okay, he wasn't averaging 85. He wasn't averaging in the mid-70s. But he averaged 89 going out in his first match. And it wasn't the Chizzy of last year. Granted, he was inconsistent last year on the Euro Tour as well. You know, you look, it's easy to say he won 3 titles and made a final. But in the last 17 European Tour events, most of which he's been the number 1 or the number 2 seed in, he's only made it to the final session in 5 of those 17. All 5 of those, he ended up not just making the final session, but making the final and won 4 of those 5 finals. But he regressed at the start of this year, unquestionably. And the question had changed from, is Chizzy finally going to win a major, to is Chizzy the player that he was? And, well, I won't say he answered the question on Tuesday, but he certainly got his season onto the right track. He didn't have the most difficult of runs. Cameron Menzies' first match is not an easy draw. He got through that in the last leg decider, and that definitely set the tone for the day. But he went against a lot of players who either didn't show up for their match or were well behind where even a struggling Chizzy was at. Adam Gavlos averaged 75. Martin Schindler averaged only 83 and just did not look himself in that match. Vincent van der Voort has been out of form, although been playing a bit better. And even the final, it was Dirk, both he and Dirk van Dijvenbode were not at their best, but Chizzy hit at the right times. There still are question marks about where Dave Chisnall's game is, but there are a lot fewer than they had been going into this past week, and certainly a lot fewer than they were after the first weekend or 2 weekends of the Pro Tour season. I think for Chizzy, it's obviously good, or to use his word, massive, to start to right the ship on the season. But the goal for this season is not to win a Pro Tour event. The goal is not to even make a deep run on television. The goal, based on what we saw from most of season 2023, at least when Chizzy was clicking and Chizzy was at his best, is to finally get that televised title. If this gets his confidence back, then yeah, it's massive for him. But let's see how things go over the next few weeks, as there's more European Tour events where he did his heaviest hitting in 2023. And let's see how he gets on as we get closer to the World Match Play, because that's the event that he should be targeting. These events are just to get his game in the right shape for when it matters.
We'll be back in a moment to look back at the Challenge Tour last weekend, also look ahead to the return of the Women's Series this weekend. But before we do, let's bring in our first guest on this week's show. And she had a big say on her debut on the Challenge Tour at the weekend. She could well have a big say on the Women's Series this weekend. Here's our chat with Noa-Lynn van Leuven. I'm pleased to say we're joined by one of the newest title winners on the Challenge Tour, Noa-Lynn van Leuven. Thanks for joining us again, Noah. How are you doing?
I am doing very well. Just finished work and now in the podcast finally.
Great to get you on, and only one place to start, and that is with Hildesheim last Friday afternoon, going all the way on your Challenge Tour debut, winning the title. What have the last few days been like for you since what was one of the biggest wins of your darts career so far?
Well, it's been insane. The amount of comments that I've been getting, positive, but also a little less positive. But no, it's been insane. Who would have thought that I would win a Challenge Tour on my debut?
And you joked on Twitter, I saw that you went to Germany to play 5 games. Obviously, these weekends they've got 5 events, so you are guaranteed that as a minimum. And you did that in the first event, winning 8 games to take the title. What was that feeling like when you won the final to win the title on debut?
Oh, I think that's something I cannot describe. It's more than I could have think of. Yeah, as I said, I went there for 5 games, and playing the 5 games in the first tournament, that's already crazy. Making it that far in a field like that, it's crazy. Yeah, you mentioned the field of players there. You beat quite a lot of the big names, the likes of Daryl Pilgrim, John Henderson, Cam Crabtree, Stefan Belmont and Titus Kanek in the final, 100 average in the final as well. As you're ticking off these wins, when do you start to think you could go and win the whole title? Oh, I've never thought about that. I just went on game by game. Yeah, as I said, I went there for 5 games, and every other game that I could win was a nice one. And you ended up averaging 89 for the weekend across those 5 events. That puts you in the top 10 of the averages for the Challenge Tour. Take away the title, how pleased are you with just that level of performance over the whole weekend? Yeah, it's so much more than I would expect from myself. I never thought I would average 89 over a whole weekend and play the games that I played. Yeah. Well, we'll come back to this year a bit later, but let's rewind back to when we last had you on the show. I was saying before we started, you were chatting with our producer Hannah in Blackpool just before you made that debut in the Women's World Match Play. The result didn't go your way, but what was that moment like walking out in the Winter Gardens and playing on that stage? Oh, it's iconic. Being able to go out on a stage like the one in the Winter Gardens, that's insane. Especially with my route to the Winter Gardens, making it in the last event of the Women's Series before cutoff. Yeah, that's been crazy as well. And then the moment when you can go out on stage to play your game, it's insane. It was my first experience on a big stage. Yeah, I didn't know what to expect, and now I do. And it was you against Bo Greaves in that first game. You and Bo, you've played plenty of times over the last year or so. You've beaten her before as well. I think you've lost to her with a 93 average one time as well. How much does her level at the top inspire not just you but the rest of the ladies to push themselves to get better and catch her? Oh, everyone just wants to beat her. And if you can do it with a 70 average or a 95, that's great, but you just want to beat Bo. I think me and Bo are playing great games each time. The last time when I played her was on the Dutch Open. I think I missed like 3 hands on a double, and that was the only chances that I got. Yeah, the level she plays is amazing, and yeah, I hope I can keep beating her maybe once. Definitely. Well, there was a lot of attention on you for the Women's World Match Play, being the first trans woman to play in a PDC tournament.
on TV. That was your first time on one of those big stages. After that, did you have anyone reach out to you and say watching you had inspired them, shared their own story with you as well?
Yeah, I've had quite a few people that reached out to me, and they told me that I was inspiring them to be able to play the thing they love, and that was darts. So, yeah, and I still keep getting those messages. After this weekend, I think I've gained maybe 200 new followers on Instagram, and also some other trans people that just want to play darts.
That's good to hear. And looking at the rest of 2023, you did the double in Malta, winning 2 titles. You had a pair of semi-finals in Ireland, a semi-final in the WDF World Cup, more deep runs on the Women's Series as well. How did you reflect on your 2023 as we turned the page over to this year?
I think 2023 has been a learning curve for me. I have improved my game a lot over the year, but I think I'm still improving my game, and that's also why I went to the Challenge Tour, because I want to bring my game to a better level, and I want to become a better player. So this year, for me, 2024 was going to be about gaining experience, playing better players, and make sure I can hit like 85 averages every other game, and doing that on my first weekend on the Challenge Tour, that's already insane.
Yeah, it's certainly been a debut to remember, and you kind of answered our next question we were going to bring up, that starting off 2024, it was your first time going to Q School, and you played the first couple of days of that first stage. Was that always the plan, to play some of it so that you were eligible for the Challenge Tour?
I went there to play, just to be able to play the Challenge Tour. But I've said to myself, if I reach final stage in the first 2 days that I play Q School, then I would go to final stage. But on the Wednesday, I had a few appointments, and I had work in the evening, so I couldn't play that day. I think if I had played that day, I would have reached final stage, because I only needed 1 good point. But it was just about being able to play the Challenge Tour and improve myself on that.
You mentioned work there. I was reading your interview that you did with The Guardian from last year, and you said that you work as a chef, then you practice for an hour a day. Is that still your normal routine, and how tough is it juggling both the work and darts together?
Some days it is, some days it isn't. Like now, I came home on Sunday. I have 4 days of work in between. I try to play like for half an hour a day. And I think that's the maximum I can get in practice-wise right now. But as I said, it's only 4 days in between. I go back to Wigan on Friday, and I'll have some practice there.
And you said as well, darts is what's brought you back to life, and the time before you transitioned was a difficult time for you. Now that you've got your story out there, do you feel like some people's attitudes are changing?
I think it is, yeah. You of course, I'm getting a lot of attention on social media, both bad and positive, but I think the group of positivities are getting bigger. It's a lot more people that are sticking up for me instead of only the negative comments.
Good to hear. And you touched on it about social media, the amount of messages that you were getting after the Challenge Tour win, a lot more positive comments. We obviously see that social media, it can be quite toxic at times as well. Do you try and avoid all of that noise on social media, just focus on those positive messages?
Oh yeah, I do. I always tell myself, don't look on social media, don't look at those messages. But sometimes you just come by the things and then you think, okay, I'll just open it and see, even though I shouldn't, because it's really terrible.
Well, let's look ahead then, and you're already confirmed for the Lakeside in December. It's going to be a debut in the WDF Women's World Championship. That's on the cards, and you said to us before it was your mum and dad that got you into darts. How proud are the family of your achievements over these last few years?
Oh, they're very proud. Every time when I go to a tournament with my mother, she watches every game, either on her phone or behind me. Sometimes she isn't allowed to stand directly behind me because sometimes she makes the weird faces that put me off in my game. But no, she is very proud. And also on this weekend, she was crying with like my last 3 games on the Friday on the first tournament. Each time when I won, I saw tears in her eyes. She was so proud.
That's lovely to hear. And before you get to the Lakeside, it is going to be the Women's Series this weekend. The way you played just last weekend, how are you feeling about possibly adding your name to that Women's Series list of winners this weekend?
Oh, that would be great. Of course, I want to bring my A game to Wigan. My goal this year is to reach the match play again and not going in on 8th place, please, because I don't want to play Bo again in the first game. But yeah, if I could win one of the Women's Series this weekend, that would be great.
And just lastly, before we let you go, you're into that top 10 of the Challenge Tour Order Merit as well, so an outside chance of a possible call up for the Pro Tour. How cool would that be to get an invite to those Players' Championships and take on the world's best at some point this year?
That would be insane. Of course, I'm hoping to get called up for the Pro Tour. Being able to play any of those players would be crazy. And I think maybe if I get a good draw, I can beat 1 or 2 players.
Well, fingers crossed you'll get the opportunity to do that. Noah, congratulations again on the title at the weekend. Thanks very much for giving us some of your time, and wish you all the best for what else is to come in 2024 as well.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks again to Noah for joining us. And moving on, we're going to be looking back now at the Challenge Tour action from the weekend and getting into our question of the week, sponsored by Condor Darts. Which title winner impressed you the most on the Challenge Tour at the weekend?
I mean, there's a lot to say for it being Noa-Lynn van Leuven. We know that she's improving. In fact, we talked about it when we talked about the state of women's darts a couple weeks ago. The number of players that, or I guess it was I don't know when, it was a while ago now that we talked about. We talked about the number of players who are improving has put women's darts in a position where it's never been before. And we saw that, Noa-Lynn really improved last year. But I don't think anyone saw her game stepping up that much, that quickly in her first event on the Challenge Tour. The consistency over the course of the day and the fact that she pretty much got better match on match as the day progressed. Well, in that part, I guess, is a summation of her last 18 months overall. But overall, it was not where we thought her game was now. Certainly, she had the potential, but if you look at it, it wasn't like she got an easy draw. Jamie Atkins' first match, Stefan Belmont, Dale Pilgrim, John Henderson, Cam Crabtree, and Titus Kennick. Those are very, very good players. I only skipped a couple players on there who aren't, too shabby themselves. But those are some very good players. And she beat them all. And she improved 83, 92, 92, 92, 93, basically 94 on that one. And then nearly a 101 in the final. That was a very, very, very impressive set of matches. And she never even got forced into a last leg decider. It's hard to pick against her for most impressive, but I think you might have to, just because of how incredible Andy Bolton was on Saturday. And most obviously, he won both events. And, I mean, it's not often that you win 2 events in a weekend. Well, for us, it never happens. But for a player of anyone on the Challenge Tour, it's not often that anyone wins 2 events over the course of the weekend. But to win 2 in one day is a mighty fine piece of work. But look at what Andy Bolton did in that first event. The consistency, fairly similar averages to what Noa-Lynn did, even peaking with a 101.5 in the final. But he only dropped 11 legs across the 8 matches. 5-1, 5-2, 5-2, 5-1, 5-3. The only one that he got pushed in because he had his worst performance, averaging 2. Then 5-0, 5-2, and 5-0 again. 11 legs dropped across 8 matches. That is some standard. It's hard to pick against Noa-Lynn because her performance on the Friday was incredible, but I have to go Andy Bolton. The 11 legs across 8 matches, and then to follow it up. Okay, he dropped a couple more later. He dropped 20 in the second event that day, but to follow it up and win the title, it's you can't pick against that. So I'm going to go Andy Bolton as most impressive, but Noa-Lynn van Leuven was very close, and I don't think we've seen the best from her because she just keeps improving each and every time we see her.
Yes, a tough one, isn't it? And firstly, thanks as always to Condor Darts for their support with our question of the week. It is our poll on Twitter, so do go and have your say as well. Lots of you getting involved. Noa-Lynn van Leuven leading the way at the moment, 47%, then Andy Bolton 32%, and Lee Cox 11%, Renee Adams on 10%. And when you hear about someone going back-to-back on the Challenge Tour, winning 2 titles, but on the same day as well, it is going to be hard to top that kind of achievement and put together that run. It does take some doing, but I'm going to go against you. I'm going to go with Noa-Lynn van Leuven on this one. And you heard from her just a moment ago on the show, and she reaffirmed what she had joked on Twitter. She didn't do much in terms of posting on social media at the weekend, at least on Twitter from what I saw, but said, I only come here to play 5 games for the weekend, and there's 5 tournaments. So you do the maths. That tells you that her expectations were far lower than winning a title, but to turn up on your first ever Challenge Tour, win the title, and as you touched on there, the way she played throughout that tournament as well makes it all the more impressive. And we have seen Noah emerge as a contender in the ladies' game over the last year or so, getting to the Women's World Match Play last year, making a final on that last Women's Series to get into Blackpool. But performing at this level and consistently is what struck me the most. And if she can produce that more frequently on the Women's Series, then I think we could be looking at Bogreaves' biggest threat for her current dominance in the women's game. But we'll come on to the Women's Series a bit more in a moment. But apart from the first round where she averaged 83, it was high 80s, low 90s all the way through, beating some of the top names in the room that you listed there. John Henderson, Stefan Belmont, Daryl Pilgrim, and players here that have already made a mark on the Challenge Tour this year. Stefan Belmont, a title winner. Daryl Pilgrim, he's got to 2 finals already this year. And then in the final to average the ton against Titus Karnik, who, let's not forget, in that final kicked it off with a 1-2-1 finish and a 108 finish in the first 2 legs to go 2-0 up. Both legs, Van Leuven, she was sat on 32 for the leg. So to go 2-0 down, she comes back, pair of 14 darters, a 12 darter. There was a scrappy 19 darter, and then to get it over the line, a 15 darter shows what she is capable of. So I'm going to put her at the top of my list. Andy Bolton's 2 titles in a day, deserves a lot of credit as well. And he's only the 5th player to win 2 Challenge Tour titles on the same day, and it's actually happened now in each of the last 3 years. Before then, you had to go back to 2014. So maybe it is getting slightly easier, but no, it's still a remarkable feat. 8 games in each tournament. The first game he started just before 11 o'clock local time in the morning. His last game of the second tournament just after 9 o'clock in the evening. So what's that? 10 hours of darts. It's quite the achievement for him. So yeah, I'd put him a close second. And just touching on the other 2, both first time winners on the Challenge Tour. Renee Adams, it was all or nothing for him at the weekend. 4 events he lost his first game. The other one he went all the way and won the title. And Lee Cox, first round he had Daryl Pilgrim. They don't get much harder than that for a first round. And then the final, Wesley Placey, the world master, and he whitewashed him 5-0. So his 2 best performances coming at either end of the tournament, and he went and won the whole thing.
Well, the Women's Series returns for 2024 this weekend, but it also marks the second half of the race to Blackpool for the 3rd annual Women's World Match Play. Which new names, though, do you think could you see lining up at the Winter Gardens in July?
Well, just looking at how things stand at the moment and the players, the top 5 on that Women's World Match Play race, they've all been to Blackpool before. You've got Bogreaves, Fallon Sherrick. They're getting the Blackpool B&Bs booked up already. Lisa Ashton, Makuru Suzuki, Rhiannon O'Sullivan, they're in 3, 4 and 5. They're looking well set to be there again. Underneath those 5, the last 3 provisional spots, at the moment there are going to be 3 debutantes. You've got Anastasia Dobromoslova, Natalie Gilbert and Aoife McCormack, and those last 2 names, we had them both on the show towards the end of last year, just after the success they had in the final Women's Series weekend of the year. You had Aoife making a final, and then in the last event of the weekend you had Natalie Gilbert becoming the newest first-time winner. And okay, this was back in mid-October. They've thrown plenty of darts in the 5 months since then, but this race to Blackpool, they would be excused for thinking about it once or twice in the last few months, because they're both in the spots, and now we are back up and running with the Women's Series this weekend. The attention on that race is going to get more intense with each event that passes. And I think just because of her pedigree in the women's game, we're seeing more signs of her form coming back. I've got to go with Anastasia as the most likely to be one of the new names in that Women's World Match Play field this year. She had a couple of finals and a semi-final last year. She's got a buffer of around £1,200 on ninth at the moment, which, okay, that could be wiped out in one weekend. So she needs to keep banking money. But that is something that she's been doing. She's cashed in on all of the last 7 women's series at the end of last year. And Natalie Gilbert, the entries for this weekend have come out. She's not in the field. She's away on holiday. But I still think she's going to be in the conversation as well. She's a title winner. The confidence that she's going to take from that. So hopefully when we get to the next weekend, she's not going to be too far behind, and there is going to be a chance for her to catch up on the rest of the players. And the two I'm going to just mention briefly who are outside of those spots at the moment, but not far off it, 12th and 13th place heading into the weekend. You've got Vicky Prume, a guest on the show just last week. She won that title in the Isle of Man, beating Bogreaves in the final. She actually missed one of the weekends in this cut-off for the match play. So had she have played in that weekend, she would have been a lot closer, you'd imagine. And the last one to mention, Kirsty Hutchinson, just below her in 13th. She's an extra £100 back, I think only £700 off that top 8. But at the end of last year, it looked like she was starting to find some form on the women's series. The last 5 events, 2 semi-finals, 2 quarter-finals, and the last of those semi-finals, it went down to the wire with her good friend Natalie Gilbert. She had a match start in that decider. Had that gone in, she might be in that top 8 right now. But if she can replicate those runs over these next 3 blocks, I think she's well within a shout as well.
Yeah, you had a few of the names I had on there. You know, if you look so far across the first 2 women's world match plays, surprisingly few players who win both of them, just the 3. Lisa Ashton, Fallon Sherrick, and Aline de Graaf. So 5 newcomers last year. And it doesn't seem like there's going to be 5 this year, although there very well could. But right now there's 3, Anastasia Dobromyslova, Natalie Gilbert, and Aoife McCormick. And there's every chance that they'll remain 3 because the people right below them include a lot of people who haven't been there before. Granted, Aline de Graaf trying to keep her perfect record. It's just £200 back. Noa-Lynn van Leuven, who you would expect if she competes will do enough to get up there, is only £500 back. But, you know, she's only won a challenge tour this year. If the challenge tour counted, that win alone would have been enough, but obviously it doesn't. And so there's a lot of people that could move in, and it could get down to just one newcomer when it's all said and done. But there's a lot of other players just outside who still could get in who haven't been there before. You mentioned Vicky Prume. I think she's a very, very good shout for this, having beaten Bogreaves on the way to a WDF title recently, having missed a weekend, and still, despite all that, being only £600 back, she's playing at a very good level. She's playing, close to the best darts that she's played in, quite some time. She used to be one of the top players 2 decades ago, and as come and gone from the scene over time, but now in the last few years, playing a lot again and playing more often has lifted her game up. She has every chance to make a debut at the Women's World Match Play this summer. Kirsty Hutchinson as well, just £700 back. Kirsi Vinakainen's £900 back, and she's had some runs in the women's series. If she can string it together as she plays more of these, we'll see. Maria O'Brien as well, just £1,200 back. Hasn't played her best stuff since COVID, but a player who I believe is a lot better than her results have shown. She is plucky and she is very good, and if she can get hot, she could win a title if she can find her game. Couple others that I had listed, but they're not there this weekend. You mentioned Natalie Gilbert isn't there. Corinne Hammond isn't playing this weekend. Neither is Modena Fajardo. 2 players who could get a run together if they had entered, but they're not here. So I think that's going to, especially since both of those 2 players are even further back, I think it's just going to leave a little bit too much, even if we do see them step up to the Aki in the coming weekends. But there's going to be at least one newcomer, if not 2 or 3, and some good players who are trying to sneak their way into the field for this summer.
We shall see. Well, we're going to finish up the show with the mailbag, but before we do, let's bring in our final guest on this week's show. He is the author of the new darts novel Slings and Arrows. Here's our chat with Nick McLoughlin.
I'm pleased to say we're joined by the author of the new novel Slings and Arrows, Nick McLoughlin. Thanks for the time, Nick. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks, Alex. It's really good of you to ask me on. Thanks.
Great to have you on. And your first novel, Slings and Arrows, which has been described as the darts version of the full Monty, set to be published on March 28th. How excited are you for that date to come around less than 2 weeks from now?
Yeah, I'm very excited, but nervous at the same time. It's will people like it? How's it going to go down? How's it going to be viewed? It's first novel. I'm naturally nervous. I've not actually I haven't got my author copies yet, but I've got a mate who pre-ordered one on Amazon. He got his last Thursday, and he sent me a picture of it propping up a wobbly table. So he's keeping my feet on the ground.
Excellent. Well, we'll come back to your new book in a moment, but I'm always interested to find out a little bit of background on our guest. And this is your debut novel, but is writing something you've always been involved in as a career?
No, it's not. No, to be honest, I suppose like many people, I've always wanted to write. I've always thought I could perhaps have a go, but truth is, I was probably afraid to fail, and didn't really know how to go about it. It's not really the sort of environment I was brought up in, with writers and things like that. So didn't really know how to go about it, and didn't have a go. And then I suppose life gets in the way, and never got around to it. I've done all sorts of jobs, but writing's not one of them. No, I've been a barman, I've been a bookmaker, all sorts of things. But this is the first time I've had a go at writing yet.
And I was reading on your website as well, you trained to be a teacher, and then it says you escaped to the French Alps to go skiing. So how long did you spend in France before coming back to the UK?
Well, I'm actually still here, weirdly. Yeah, I did that, about 25, 26 years ago, came to France just with the intention of doing one season skiing, and really loved it over here, and ended up getting married here. My kids were born here. And it's been a really lovely place to bring kids up. It's quiet, it's sort of safe. But I'm sure I get back to the UK often, at least 2 or 3 times a year to see friends and family and things like that. And I do miss the fish and chips and a good pub, definitely. But so I'm still here.
Happy days. Well, let's get on to your new book then. And as we said earlier, it's being labelled as the darts version of the full Monty. Where did the inspiration to write your first novel come from? And then with darts as the theme behind it as well. Yeah,
well, I've always loved darts. I've followed it, since the 80s, since I was young. Always loved the drama of it. I think it's just a great spectacle. The theatre, you've got the costumes, you've got the characters, the music, the way the crowd are encouraged to be part of the spectacle. I've always loved that. I thought it was really exciting. And I wanted to write, when I decided to write a novel, I wanted to write about male friendship, and how rubbish in general men are talking to each other. And darts and a darts team seemed a really perfect vehicle for putting a bunch of blokes together and exploring that topic. And then the darts matches themselves within the novel just give me the set pieces and the humour, which I was hopefully bringing into the book as well.
Definitely, and we won't give too much away. The story is set in Derby in 1982. It follows a character called Terry, 45 years old. He's playing for his local darts team, but as you touched on there, it's a story that focuses on that friendship, love, family as well. For our listeners, can you give them more of an idea of what they can expect when they do read it?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's a story about real people, I think, and by that I mean ordinary people like you and me, and people like your listeners. It's a tight community, people with financial worries, importance of friends and family, balanced with that humour. So I hope it's moving. I hope that the reader will care about the characters, but they'll, laugh along as well and enjoy the darts in it.
And I read that you've always played darts yourself a little bit as well. Is that just at home or with friends in the pub, or did you ever join a darts team like Terry did?
No, I have always played darts. Always had a board up at home, played with friends, and in the pub when I was back in the UK. But I've never been in a darts team, and I think probably because I've been in France for such a long time, and it's just not really a thing over here. Hopefully that'll change with a littler effect maybe. But I think if I'd have stayed in the UK, I'd have definitely joined the team. And who knows, maybe something in the future.
And you mentioned earlier as well, you've been a keen follower of darts on TV. Have you always kept an eye on the darts, the big events, and who are your favourite players to watch?
Yeah, definitely. I look back and I think that I grew up in the golden age of darts, Bristow and John Lowe, Jockey Wilson, people like that. Keith Dello, I suppose, was our Luke Littler at the time. He was young, maybe not as young as Luke, but he certainly looked it at the time. Came in as a unseeded and beat the world's top 3 and went on to win the championship. It's incredible at the time. And obviously, John Lowe, I suppose, is the one for me. He perhaps didn't have the flamboyance of some of the others, but he was a local lad to me. I was born and brought up in Derby, and John Lowe was from Derbyshire as well. So old Stoneface was the man for me with his bullets as well. I really enjoyed him.
Yeah, what a player he was back in the day. And I'm always interested as well, just going back to the whole process of how you get from the initial idea for this novel to then seeing it published and out in the world. This is the first time you've had a novel published. So what has that process been like for you?
Yeah, it is the first time. A long process. It's been over 5 years probably from sitting down to start writing to getting to this stage. Lots of knockbacks from agents and publishers. I've heard J.K. Rowling had plenty of knockbacks, so I'll take that. But, it's been tough, definitely. But when my publisher, the Book Guild, came along and offered me a contract, it was a fantastic moment for me. And now I suppose it seems a bit surreal, to be honest.
So for you, what's been the hardest part of those 5 years? Was it that initial finding a publisher to commission your book? Was it the actual writing part, getting the story to where you wanted it, or something else?
Well, the actual writing certainly is, for me, difficult. It's like, blood out of a stone. It's a tough process. But I think the biggest thing is actually giving myself permission to have a go, giving myself permission to sit in a room for hours and then writing something that might never get read, when you've got other responsibilities like, kids, wife, job, what have you. Actually giving myself permission to take the time to have a go when I might just be whistling in the wind. I think that was really the toughest hurdle to get over. Yeah. So
now you've got your first novel published. Have you got an idea on the follow-up? Are you going to be putting another one together, or is it just a case of, right, I've achieved this in my life, or have you got the bug now to want to do more?
Yeah, I have definitely got the bug. Yeah, I'm about halfway through another novel. Yeah, it's not darts themed, unfortunately, but it's about a young lad who he gets accused of pushing his friend off a roof and ends up in a reform school and then prison. It's a story about truth and memory and his journey to actually find out what happened rather than what the adults have led him to believe happened. So, I'm working on that at the moment.
We'll keep an eye out for that. And just lastly, before we let you go, I spotted as well you're a Liverpool football fan. We're not going to mention the result against United yesterday when we were talking, but still lots to play for this last season under Jurgen Klopp. How do you think Liverpool are going to fare in the running?
I've been moping around the house all day, honestly. That Nunes pass inside for their third goal, I think, is going to haunt me for a long time. But the only way I'll get over it, I think, is if we go on to win the league, which would be a fitting end for Klopp, who's just been a fantastic manager for Liverpool. My dad got me in the 70s, so I've lived through the good times and then the slump for 20 odd years, and it's been fantastic to see how he's brought the club back again, and we'll see who comes next.
Yeah, he's going to be a tough act to follow. Well, Nick, congratulations on the launch of your new book coming up very soon, Slings and Arrows. Link's going to be in the description, so to all of our listeners, do go and check it out. Wish you all the best with that and what else is to come in 2024 as well.
Thanks so much, Alex. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. Cheers.
Thanks again to Nick for joining us, and we'll finish up the show with the mailbag. We've got a couple of questions from our listeners. The first one comes from Ajit Vasani, who says, Dart Golf, 128 players to start, players play in pairs, 18 legs each, equal shots each leg, has a par number of shots, e.g. starting on 170 is a par 3, finishing in 2 shots a birdie, 4 shots a bogey, etc. 350-point hole is a tough par 4, 401 a par 5. After 36 holes, field is cut to 64, then play the last 36 holes. Winner is the player who plays all 72 holes in the least shots. Brilliant concept, I think. What do you reckon?
I mean, I think it's a decent practice game, but I can't. I think that will, one, take quite a bit of time, but two, I like that darts is head to head. I don't see what we get from having an event where everyone is competing at the same time for first place. It is an interesting concept. There's no doubt about that, but I can't see this at the professional level. That said, I need to work on my doubles, and this gets me practicing combinations more often and getting me to the doubles quicker. So in that regard, I don't mind it for a practice game. Doubles did me down, or let me down in my practice on Monday. I nearly had an 11 darter. I nearly had a couple other 12 darters. One of those ended up being 26 darts because I couldn't hit my doubles. So something where I am starting we'll call it the hole on 170, means I'm going to be on a double quicker. Yeah, I need that practice. I definitely need that practice. So I can see it having some utility as a practice game to get you trying different things and to be working on your setup and finishing more often and more quickly. But I just don't see it as a professional game.
Yeah, I'm on a similar line to you. And just reading that question back, I've got to admit, I did get a little bit confused to begin with. And one of the good things about darts as a sport to watch is that it is fairly easy to quickly understand the rules of 501, how you both start with 501 points. You've got to get to 0 before your opponent does finish on a double. That's it. That's all the rules that you basically need to know. It's one of the things that makes it so accessible to people either watching, playing, or a bit of both. But I'm always up for something different, though. Jazz up the rules, like we've got the double start for the Grand Prix. We've talked about it in the past, a darts shootout like the old News of the World best of 3 or a best of 1, one leg, 1001. The idea of starting on different numbers, though, that does sound quite interesting, like a 170 as a par 3, a 350 as a par 4. That's something that I've got to admit I've not heard of before. And if I was Ajit, I'd be putting some time in, get an app made or a website where you can play dart golf, because like you, I think with a group of, you say 3 or 4 people, it could be good fun to play just to mix it up a bit instead of the usual 501. So yeah, I can't picture it being something that we're going to see on TV, but I'd definitely like to have a go at it myself, and I'm sure our listeners would too.
And I'll just add, like, for a practice game, then you can have, you can use it to handicap if someone you're playing with is a little bit better. So I think it does have utility as a practice game. But now we'll go on to a question from Allison Wright, who says, I love your podcast. Best question we've ever received, but there is more to it. She also adds, with regard to the PDC wanting to make darts more popular, do you think it will spoil the sport by making it become a free-for-all, drinking all day, all night, with non-darts fans just there, who just are there for a night out and to heckle the players and ruin the atmosphere?
Well, it's already like that now, isn't it? No, I'm joking. I think this is something to keep an eye on, particularly this year, off the back of the growing popularity in the game right now. There's more people getting into darts, and let's be fair, we can't paint them all with the same brush. But I do get Alison's concern that we may see the more casual fan going to events that want to heckle the players, the whistling and the booing. And as Alison, all our listeners will know, we're great advocates for the Boo in the Car Park campaign. I've not sat down and watched any of the Premier League this year, just the odd highlights clips that crop up on social media. But I remember there was one incident of whistling very early on in the Premier League, but I've not stumbled across too many incidents like that recently. So for me, I'm particularly interested in what the atmosphere is going to be like later on in the year when we've got events like the World Matchplay. The tickets for that event sold out. It's got to have been in record time. I'm sure someone can confirm that. But there was a few of my friends asking me about going, and I said, well, you're a few weeks late now, gents. It sold out pretty much straight away when the tickets went on sale. So, yeah, I get the concern. I'm with you, Alison. It's great to see these events getting more interest, the tickets selling quicker than before. But let's see what the atmosphere is like. And if it changes too much, I certainly hope not anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think some events do just descend into chaos because of the crowd sometimes, but I don't think it's not a new issue. I think there is the risk that as more people are watching darts, and if they start watching and seeing bad crowds, it'll escalate. But as you mentioned, so far the Premier League has been, for the most part, good, except when there's a hometown or home country player. And that's a good sign that it seems to be a little bit better. I do think that's always a risk, but as the question itself mentions, most of those people aren't really darts fans. And when you get to a real darts fan crowd in, like the World Match Play, it makes it so much better. And I guess that's the fear. If suddenly people start going to the World Match Play thinking it's like the Premier League or the World Championships, and starts to ruin that atmosphere, I think there can be a problem. But I don't know what the solution is. We've talked about it before, and it's a tough thing to figure out, how to balance the crowd wanting to have a good time with elements of the crowd that are just going well beyond what they should to interfere with people's livelihoods. Anything else for this week?
Well, we've got a few thank yous as always. Thank you to our guests for joining us, to Noah and Nick for their time. Thank you to our sponsors, to Darts Corner and Condor Darts, for their continued support. Links in the description. Do go and check them out. Thank you to everyone for listening as well. Always say, whatever you're doing, make sure you enjoy the darts. And finally, finishing on a sad note, we learnt last week the sad news that Dick Alex had passed away. Dick, he was one of the co-founders of the WDC, what is now the PDC, along with Tommy Cox and John Markovich. And before that, he was the player manager of Eric Bristow during the 1980s, his run of dominance when Eric won 5 world championships in the BDO. And it was great to get Dick on our show. It was during lockdown when we were doing our Darts Legend series, and listening to his stories and insight into, you got to say, some of the most important and historic periods there's been in darts. So yeah, just finally sending our thoughts to Dick's family and friends at this time. And like with Tony Greaves passing a few weeks ago, someone who is going to be remembered in the world of darts for the contribution that they've given to the game.
Yeah, just echoing those thoughts. It's been quite a few sad losses recently in darts, and a lot of that founding generation of the PDC is now gone, and it's different. But at the same time, we need to celebrate what they were able to build into getting darts to where it is now. And Dick Alex obviously will be missed by many, many people in the world of darts. That said, thank you guys all for listening. We'll be back next week to look ahead to another Euro Tour weekend, recap the women's series, lots of other stuff coming up. Maybe we'll even talk some Premier League at some point. Nah, probably not. But that's all for the future. I'll also be back with a new computer next week, so hopefully the quality of the recording goes up, or at least doesn't suffer, as my very old computer is about to break down. So hopefully things will be better next week. We'll just have to hang tight to find out.